All right, so I am here to actually talk about community and that community and how community is a way that you can supercharge your career in tech. Now, I'm not necessarily going to talk about very specific careers, but I'm just going to do talk about how you can use involvement in community generally to help you to either move your career forward or to get yourself started. And I'm just going to begin by actually introducing myself. My name is Nathaniel, and I'm a developer evangelist at a company called Twilio. So you may have never heard of Twilio. Twilio is a cloud communications platform with lots of APIs that allow developers to interact with telecommunications. So, for example, if you wanted to send a text or make a phone call from code, you can do that. And lots of massive businesses actually use Twilio. For example, if you've had a two-factor authentication from Twitch, or maybe your Uber driver or delivery driver has maybe given you a phone call, all of those interactions, many of them are powered by Twilio. And I work for them, sort of talking to other developers about how they can use Twilio in whatever they are building. But I'm actually here to talk about community. And before I do that, I just want to talk about some of the things that I actually really enjoy doing in my spare time. And one of them is I enjoy watching sports. And recently I enjoyed watching the Tokyo Olympics. Now, Tokyo Olympics, it was all right this year. I quite enjoyed it. But one of my favorite sports to watch, and we did really bad in the Olympics this year actually, is cycling. And usually Great Britain has actually got a really strong cycling team, but over the last Olympics, they didn't necessarily live up to the glories of some people that have won a lot in the past. But one of the reasons why I actually like cycling is because it's one of the Olympic sports that I can see and then I can actually practice, because you only need two pieces of equipment. You need yourself, the athlete, and you need a bicycle. And I actually think that our careers are very much like this. Our careers, when we're moving forward in the race of our careers, trying to get there, there are a couple of ways we can speed up, move faster, and move further. Now, one of them is working on the athlete itself, which is what you do day to day at work. Now, for many of us, that would mean our coding skills or the things that we actually do day to day in terms of writing code, maybe having conversations with people, writing documentation, and so many different things. Maybe you're a product manager and different things like that. So there's the things you actually do day to day. And then we have the bicycle, which is the other part of this. And these are the non work things that you do to advance your career. Now, just like in real life, there are many different types of bicycles, and some are more geared towards performance than others. If you were to take an athlete and have them ride a sort of old lounging bike for a certain amount of time, they may complete a distance in a certain time. But then if you were to get that same athlete and upgrade them on a different bike, it would be different. However, if you take Sir Chris Hoy, who is one of the most decorated Olympic cyclists, put him on a rickety old bike, he will completely destroy me. Put him on a really, really good bike, he will still destroy me. And what the reason why I'm saying this is I'm not trying to take away any shine from your tech skills or the skills that you actually use every single day at work. I'm just here to tell you that you can switch that old rickety bike to a bit more of a streamlined one for performance to help do things outside of work that can advance your career in tech. But what I'm actually here to talk about is community. So let me get back to that and leave the cycling alone. Now, when I started at university, I went to Goldsmiths University to study computing. And one of the things that I was very, very fortunate to kind of stumble upon was this student organization called Hacksmiths. And I became very involved with Hacksmiths. I actually eventually joined their committee. And honestly, this was one of the best decisions for my career as a whole, being involved in this community. And I'll explain how this benefited me in a bit later. But what I want to encourage each and every one of you is to find a community with people that you enjoy being around, that you identify with, and that you can learn from. Some of the people I still to this day admire most, I met in this community, and I learned so much from them. But you don't necessarily have to join a student society or maybe run hackathons like I did. There are so many different communities that you can join, different types of community activities. But the first one I would say most of us can do is join a discussion, get involved in those conversations. Now, that could be in many different places. For example, I actually found out about Zontos because I joined the WhatsApp group that they have, and I joined a conversation a few times on there. You may be on Twitter and you have lots of people in tech that you are in contact with. You can join the conversations on there. Lots of people now are having more and more conversations, especially powered by voice apps such as Twitter Spaces. And people are having really good conversations, so definitely get involved. Another thing you can do is write a blog. Now, I'm pretty sure lots of people you may have heard this before, but writing a blog, one thing that's really good about it is it helps you document your learnings and contribute to the wider internet tech community space. So maybe if you're someone who doesn't necessarily want to talk to people one to one, maybe another thing you can do is enjoy writing. You may also want to contribute to open source. Now, one thing that is really good about this particular type of community is that the actual skills that you exercise in the community are the exact same skills you might be executing at work. And it's also really useful because you get to work and have a closer understanding of some of the tools that you'll be working with. So, this is another community that you might want to get involved in. You may want to organize or speak at events, or you may want to manage a community of your own. Many times, communities are constantly looking for volunteers that can help them out, help them to sort of grow and to run different events and different things that they have planned. So, definitely find out if the community that you're involved in needs help. And there are so many more, literally, so many different places of community. But there is a common thread that I think you should do. You should find things that you care about and find interesting. For me, I loved running tech events and I loved speaking at tech events. And I actually got that opportunity because I was involved with Hacksmiths, the tech society that I talked about earlier. So you should find your community and find the style in which you can contribute to that community that works for you. For some people like me, who is quite an extrovert and enjoys talking, that means I like to go to events and do a lot of talks. And for some people, maybe they really enjoy sitting down in a room and just researching a topic and writing a detailed blog post about it. Definitely find the way that works for you and contribute to your community that way. But whatever way you decide to contribute to your community, there are definitely some common things that help you be successful in it. And one of them is to be present. So just being here, just by being in the audience right now at this conference, you're already taking a great step. So don't feel bad if you're lurking. But another thing you can do is contribute. So if there is an opportunity to help, get involved, get your voice heard. And another thing that I really think is important is to document. Write down somewhere the places you've either visited or contributed or any way that you've taken part in a community. Now, I myself have a document that I keep every 6 months and I refresh it, and has a list of all the places I've gone, all the events that I've maybe spoken at, and also maybe if there's a time that someone's sent me a Twitter DM about maybe a post I made or about something that helped them, I also stick those in there because those are all evidences of me interacting with this community. So these three things, and I'll talk about how you can use the things you document in a bit later. But why should you do all this? How does all of these different things that I've just spoke about help you get that performance style bike that you can ride on? Well, there are a couple of different things you can gain. And I'm going to go through them one by one and talk about how I will literally give an example of how I was able to gain this from being part of a community. And one of them is to learn about the industry. Now, what has been really cool, I was listening to some of the lightning talks before me, is that there were different people from different roles in tech. We had someone talk about security, we had someone talk about being a product manager, and there's so many other different roles in tech. Now, when I first went to university and decided I wanted to get into tech, I thought I'm just going to be a programmer. I don't like that's what I'm going to do. Now I know that a programmer is a very broad term. It's rarely ever that you get a job title named programmer. And there are so many different things within tech that you can do even if you code, and so many things you can do even if you don't code. So, definitely being involved in communities gives you insight into what's actually happening in a workplace and what types of jobs actually exist. Now, one of the events that I ran, a hackathon, it was called, oh, I completely forgot the name of the Anvil Hack. That was it. There was a hackathon I ran called Anvil Hack. And this guy came and he came and he spoke about this awesome company. And one thing I loved about him was all my life I loved public speaking and I really enjoyed coding, but they were two separate worlds. And I remember when I met him, he was the first person I saw to live code during a demonstration. And I was like, wow, there is an actual job that exists where you get to put both of these things together. Now, it's very ironic because this person inspired me to kind of go down this career path. And because he moved to Australia, I literally have his job. So definitely go out and find out what kinds of opportunities there are in the world of tech, and you can find the one that would work for you. And one thing I would say in order to do that successfully is to make sure you ask questions. When you meet someone with a job title that maybe you don't recognize or you don't understand what that actually means, ask them what they do day to day. And you might find out that this thing actually covers a couple of subsets of skills that you thought maybe just stay as hobbies, but now you get to get paid to do them. Another thing that you can gain from being involved in communities is growing your network. And I think this one is super important. I went to an event a couple of years ago called MLH HackCon, where lots of different community organizers got together to talk about how they can run events. And you can see two people. You can see me in the corner and this other guy that I met at this event. Now, this person, he gave me a free ticket to go to a conference. This conference is called Signal. And it's so ironic because just last Wednesday, I actually had an interview with this person talking about how he was creating some content for this Signal conference 4 years later. Now, what do I mean by that? This interview didn't happen by chance. It happened because me and him had stayed in contact. And when it came time to do that conference, I reached out and I said, "Would you like to talk about the things that you're doing on a stream?" And he said, "Yes." And because of that, I want to also say that keep your relationships warm. Make sure you stay in contact with those people that you gain in your network. Just having them on LinkedIn, that's a good first step. But if you see someone again and again, or you see someone that maybe is in a career field that you really want to move towards, try and keep that relationship warm. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to meet them up in person all the time, but just keep those interactions that you have going with them on a regular basis. Now, another thing you can do is you can pad your resume or your CV and your performance review. And you can do this in a couple of ways. You can capitalize on this in a couple of ways. Now, the first and most obvious one is if you've already started working, let your manager know. The number of times I've actually been in a position where someone said, "Oh, I saw Nathaniel do this." And my manager said, "I didn't know you did this. Why didn't you tell me? That way I can give you credit for it." If your manager doesn't know, they can't actually take those things and use it when they're assessing your performance, or whether they're assessing they're going to give you a job. You should link it back to your work skills. So if you do something, think about some of the practical ways that this helps you at work and write this down when you're documenting it. And also try and get your company involved. If you realize that there's something your company can gain from your involvement in your community, make sure your company knows about it. That way they can remember, "Oh, it was that person that gave us this opportunity." They get extra brownie points. Like, this is literally a quote from a document I wrote for one of my performance reviews. I said, "I've attended 32 community events and spoken to over 2,500 developers. And at the start of every single talk, I explained what Twilio is." I literally did it at the start of this talk. And now that is value to Twilio. I can put that in my performance review and hopefully score some bonus points. But if you've done all of that when you're working, it's very important for you to do one thing. don't just take all of these benefits that you got from this community. Make sure you give back. I was so fortunate to be able to go back after I'd started working for Twilio to another event that my friends were running that I'd been a part of. I used to organize this event and I was able to come back as a sponsor and support it. Give back to those communities that you're involved in. And if you do all of that, you'll be able to take that bicycle of your career and make it more streamlined so you can go just a bit further. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Nathaniel. If you want to talk to me or hit me up, feel free to find me online on Twitter at chatterboxcoder. And thank you for listening. Now, I think there might be some questions that appear for me anytime soon. So we'll see. If there are no questions, that's totally fine. What advice would you give to anyone attending a careers fair? How can I get the best of it, out of it? So one of the things I would really suggest doing is go to each of the people and ask them, like, what is your job title and what do you actually do? Okay. Now, there will be people who are just recruiters at events, and they're usually not the people that I'm interested in. I'm interested in people who do jobs similar to what I'm trying to do. And I go and have conversations about them and about not necessarily just what they do, but how they do it there. The next question is, what is? Sorry, and back to the first one. Also, ask them if they're hiring, and if they are, ask them if they could give you any advice about the hiring process, because usually these people will be involved and can give you insider tips. What's the best part of being a developer evangelist? My favorite part is the fact that I get to go around and talk to people. My Twitter handle is called @chatterboxcoder, and my friend actually came up with that name because I love talking. So if you ever meet me in person, you'll know why. And I love meeting new people. And the biggest thing for me is I love when I'm talking to someone and I explain something with tech related, or I do a coding demo and I see their eyes light up like, wow, this piece of tech that Nathaniel just showed me is amazing and solved my problems. So that's my best part of being a developer evangelist, and the travel as well. And then the next question is, did I ever face imposter syndrome? What advice would you give to overcome this? Now, yes, I do. I won't say did. Yes, I do face imposter syndrome. However, I've actually gotten so much better at dealing with it than before. And one of the things is the document that I spoke about, where I write down my wins. I actually have a win document, and I don't mean it in an arrogant way. It's not really for other people. Oftentimes, maybe if I'm feeling, am I actually good at this job? I actually just go into that document and read all those things. I'm like, there's no way I'm good at it. It helps boost my confidence. But another thing is to really focus on the things that you sort of have learnt along the way. So look at your progress. One thing I love doing is I ask myself, oh, Nathaniel from last year or Nathaniel from 2 years ago, what would he think about Nathaniel now? And I go, Nathaniel of 2 years ago, if I had told him Nathaniel would be doing all of these things now, he'd be like, Nathaniel's such a badass. So that's one of the things that I do a lot as well. Someone said, great talk. Love the bike analogy. Thank you. What tips do I have for introverts who want to get involved in the community? Now, I totally think that this is a very valid question, because there is a social battery that everyone has, and different things tax that social battery much faster than others. So for me personally, like, talking doesn't necessarily tax my social battery. But being in lots of crowds, like if I'm in a really big crowd, that taxes my social battery really quickly. So I usually just avoid situations and try and find the places where I can get involved in the community without those massive crowds. So usually if I am in a place with a massive crowd, I go and try and find and talk to one person in the hallway, if that makes sense. So there may be ways that you feel really confident expressing yourself. Go and find those safe spaces. But also, I do encourage people that even if you're introverted, there are many people who are willing to create accessible spaces where you can feel comfortable. And reach out and keep going to events, and you will find those spaces. And someone asked, I'm in my final year at university. What should I be doing to secure a job before I graduate? And I get asked this question many times, and my biggest one is always the same. Events, different places where developers cover, like, just over and over again. Because I rarely ever go to a tech event where someone doesn't say we are hiring. It helps me learn about the industry and keep up to date. And the one thing I really think is it takes away some of the misconceptions that you have when you haven't got that first job. It looks like this bubble where inside the bubble everything maybe is either great or it's really hard to get in. And once you're inside, you realize, oh, this is not necessarily the way I thought it was. But when you go to quite a lot of events and you're able to talk to people, you can get more of an insider's view of it. The next question, where can I find an event? Is there a website that you use? Now, this one's tricky because when I started, I didn't know many events, and it was really a case of going to a few and then finding the speakers that I really liked, following them, and then finding out they're speaking somewhere else. And then slowly and slowly, my knowledge of how many events grew. If that makes sense. And then there's also many more events coming on the calendar. So, for me, right now, it's Twitter, but there is also a website that I go to. I literally, for me, because I'm a JavaScript developer, I usually just Google JavaScript events, and the website is one of the first one that comes up. I'm trying to remember what the name of that website is. I'm really annoyed at myself now because I don't remember where it is. But there's a website that's just dropped off the top of my head where you can actually find tech conferences, and it will just list the different tech conferences that are coming, and you can actually filter by maybe what technology you want to watch. Also, confs.tech, that's it. Confs.tech, so confs.tech. That's one of my favorite places, at least. But it's not going to have everything. You should still be talking to people on Twitter, talking to people that you've seen at different events, and finding out where they're going. Cool. Looks like that is it. Thank you so much for listening. I really enjoyed talking about community. And if you ever want to talk to me in person, hit me up at Chatterboxcoder on Twitter or anywhere else you might see me.